Right, good morning. Welcome to the 9 a.m. Thursday, March 17th hearing for the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. We are in conference room 325. And first up on the agenda this morning, we have Senate Bill 2720. This is making some changes to the EV charging system rebate program. And first up to testify, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Good morning, Chair Lowen. Good morning, Vice Chair Martin and members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill. We submitted testimony in support, and I would just also like to add that we're also supportive of the amendments requested by the Public Utilities Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And next we have Hawaii Public Utilities Commission.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. You have our testimony in support and available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have City and County of Honolulu, DPP, or Department of Design and Construction. Walter, oh, not in person, in support. Benjamin Sullivan, City and County of Honolulu, Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency.
Good morning, Chair Lowen. Thanks to the committee for the opportunity to testify. We are in support of the bill, and we have offered some friendly recommendations that might also improve the program. Happy to answer questions about those if there's interest. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Ted Bolin, Climate Protectors Hawaii in support. Maui Nui EV Association in support. Kauai Climate Action Coalition in support. Aloha Animal Advocates and Pelilani Farm in support. Hawaiian Electric in support.
Good morning, Chair Bowen, Vice Chair Martin, and committee members. We stand on our written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you.
Ulupono Initiative in support.
Good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, members of the committee. Micah Munikata on behalf of the Ulupono Initiative will stand on our testimony in support of this measure. Thank you very much.
And then we have, who else is present? Tesla, Sandy Wong.
Yes, good morning, Chair Lowen. Sandy Wong on behalf of Tesla. We have submitted written testimony that we will stand on. We are in strong support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hawaii EV Association. Noel Morin in support. And Noel also for Big Island EV Association.
I'm standing in for Noel Morin.
Okay,
Hawaii, pardon?
Go ahead.
Hawaii EV stands by our written testimony, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. And then we have Alliance for Automotive Innovation, Tiffany Yajima.
Good morning, Chair. Tiffany Yajima for the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. We stand on our written testimony in support.
Blue Planet Foundation.
Good morning, Chair. Blue Planet will stand on its testimony in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we also have testimony and support from 350 Hawaii, Kauai EV, Kauai Women's Caucus, Hawaii Energy, KIUC, Retail Merchants, Energy and Climate Action Committee, and 41 individuals in support. I think that's everybody. So anyone we missed who signed up to testify in person? If not members, any questions? Great, okay, we'll move on. Next on the agenda.
Sorry, I'm here.
Did you sign up to testify in person? I didn't have your name on the list, Douglas. Are you with the organization?
Yes, ILWU, HSI.
On SB 2570, 2720 relating to the electric vehicle charging system rebates, or a different bill?
My apologies, 2510.
Okay, that's at the end of the agenda. So thank you. Next we have Senate Bill 2570. This is another zero emission fueling rebate program that looks at adding the hydrogen refueling stations to this rebate program. First up, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
The Hawaii State Energy Office stands on its testimony and support. Thank you.
Hawaii Public Utilities Commission.
We'll stand on our testimony, offering comments and available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Also signed up to testify in person, we have Kauai EV, Sonia Cass.
I'm here for representing Kauai EV, which is, I'm president of that organization, but I'm also standing in for Hawaii EV, and we have the same opinion, so I'm going to testify for both. We are in strong opposition to this bill. It has great potential to impede the expansion of electric vehicle infrastructure. We recommend deferring it. Everything about hydrogen vehicles, even though the electric cars is more expensive than on electric cars, the efficiency is less than a third of battery electric vehicles. There's currently no way to transport liquid hydrogen between the islands. There's one prototype ship that they're testing right now. And 97% of all hydrogen worldwide is made from fracked methane. And I understand that SD2 has made it for green hydrogen only, but it's still the fossil fuel industry that's pushing for hydrogen. There's only 2 hydrogen vehicles available in the United States right now. Honda has stopped producing theirs, and so it's 10 years in the future that hydrogen might have a chance, but please defer this measure, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, signed up to be here in person, we have Julie Yunker, Hawaii Gas.
Hey, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Julie Yunker on behalf of Hawaii Gas in support of SB 2570 SD2. The promise of hydrogen as a fuel for alternative zero emission fuel vehicles brings together all stakeholders in this arena who agree that a sufficient runway is needed to make this valuable fuel source widely available to consumers. The bill provides for new technology, including hydrogen, as we progress towards our net negative carbon goal of 2045. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then Alliance for Automotive Innovation.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Tiffany Yajima for the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. The automakers support the intent of this measure, but we do note that it was amended to exclude stations that dispense a non-renewable hydrogen. We ask that the committee remove this limitation because hydrogen is a cleaner fuel and important technology pathway that can help the state achieve carbon emissions reductions while growing the state's EV market. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I believe that's everyone who signed up to testify in person. We also have testimony from Climate Protectors Hawaii in opposition, Maui Nui EV Association in opposition, Servco Pacific in support, Energy and Climate Action Committee of the Environmental Caucus in opposition, Kauai Climate Action Coalition in opposition, Aloha Animal Advocates in Peleilani Farm in opposition, Ulupono Initiative in support, 350 Hawaii in opposition, and then 41 individuals in opposition and 1 offering comments. Was there anyone I missed who signed up to testify in person on Zoom? No, there's no one in the room. If not, members' questions. I might have a quick question for maybe at State Energy Office.
Yes, good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Just curious, do you think there's some kind of opportunity cost? I mean, my personal take on it is there's a lot of opportunity and a place in the future for hydrogen for things like transit, manufacturing, and more heavy duty vehicles and equipment. But the ship seems to have mostly sailed as far as passenger cars go. So if we focus on, if we try to craft state policy to focus on venturing down 2 pathways at once as far as passenger cars go, is there an opportunity cost involved in that? Or is it better policy to focus on 1?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I think that's a important question to ask, especially given that we have limited funds available to support the various transition activities. We did submit testimony in support. We do think there's a role for hydrogen, but as you identified, I think that role is more looking like it's shaping up for the medium and heavy duty market rather than the passenger car market. So to the extent that these funds that are earmarked in this idea for a rebate, the EV charging station rebate, would be focused on EV and then less EV charging stations being installed at the expense of hydrogen fueling stations. I think there is an opportunity cost there, especially in the sense that a hydrogen fueling station is about $1 million. So we've actually been starting to think along the lines of perhaps recommending to the legislature an independent appropriation for a hydrogen fueling station as another means to help support that part of the transition, separate or distinct from this particular EV charging rebate program. But we do think it is important to support hydrogen as well.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions, members? Okay, we'll move on. I saw Rep. Matioshi thinking about asking a question, but he's abstaining. Sounds good. Okay, we will move on to Senate Bill 2196, and this is regarding electric vehicle charging stations and homeowners associations and condo associations. And first up to testify, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha. The Energy Office stands on its testimony and support and available for any questions. Thank you.
And then we have CAI, I believe that's the Condominium Association Institute.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Phil Nerney, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Community Associations Institute. CAI supports the intent of this bill and the broader energy goals of self-reliance. We do have some practical concerns about some indefiniteness and lack of clarity in this bill, and have proposed some amendments with respect to how the bill might be improved. That's in written testimony. Basically, we, consistent with what I've just heard, suggest that this be limited to electric vehicle charging stations rather than a broad term of zero emission, because we don't really know what that means and it's not actionable from an association perspective. Second, the original bill had a 2030 timeline, which would provide an opportunity to budget if it's going to apply to existing associations. We had at one point thought that it was going to simply apply to new construction, as in entirely new association. The language that's in the bill right now is hard to understand in terms of what the trigger for action would be. Beyond that, to the extent that there's a proviso that seems to take into account the report of a working group that the legislature previously appointed, we would like to request that the words "as reasonably determined by the board" be included, because it is just unclear who has the authority to make a decision with respect to whether there's an appropriate basis of the infrastructure. And finally, another practical problem is that parking stalls are frequently privately owned property and not within the control of an association board of directors. And also, we would like to see some kind of ratio to the extent that association owned and controlled unit parking stalls are subject to a mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Hawaiian Electric.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. June Shi on behalf of Hawaiian Electric, standing on our written testimony in support and providing a suggested amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Tesla.
Yes, good morning, Chair Lowen. Sandy Wong on behalf of Tesla will stand on our written testimony and support. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the Hawaii EV Association. I assume, Sonia, that's you again. Okay, not still present.
Sorry, I was just muted. I didn't.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Hawaii stands on our written testimony and are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then NIOP, Evan Uy.
Hello, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, members of the committee, Evan Oye on behalf of NIOP Hawaii. We stand on a written testimony in opposition to the bill. Mahalo for opportunity. Will be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then it looks like we have support from comments from Associa Hawaii, support from Kauai Women's Caucus, Climate Protectors Hawaii, Maui Nui EV Association, Kauai Climate Action Coalition, Kauai EV, Big Island EV, BIA, Hawaii in opposition, Alliance for Automotive Innovation with comments, Pearl City Neighborhood Board Chair in support, and then an additional 20 individuals in support. Did I miss anyone who signed up to testify in person? If not, members, any questions? All right, I have a question. Who for maybe Condo Association Institute? In reading this bill, I'm trying to figure out, and I'm wondering if you're reading it the same. It seems like it's just requiring plans. It's not requiring actual construction. So I'm not sure if that's your take on it, or if it is requiring construction or, addition of EV charging or implementation of the plans for the EV charging systems or zero emission fueling systems, whatever you want to call it. Is that a cost that would be borne solely by the owners through association dues?
Yes, associations are zero-sum entities, so that if $1 has to be spent, it's owners that have to spend it. There is no external source unless government's going to provide funding. So part of the concern about having clarity in terms of what is the requirement, what are the triggers, is that associations will need to plan, need to budget. And to go to the earlier or initial comment, if the association is going to have to plan, it's going to have to get technical expertise. There will be expenses associated with it. And it does appear to be a mandate that requires action.
So also given, I'm not sure if you're aware that the estimated difference in cost of kind of built, like for at least for new construction, of building the electrical wiring, et cetera, into the parking areas is 10 times less than having to come in and retrofit it after the fact. And if we're looking at a state law that would mandate that associations come in and do it after the fact, would you think it makes sense to just require it upfront with the construction?
Our position has always been, since as far back as I think it was 2015, the working group, Act 164 working group, was that it's entirely appropriate for new construction. The report of the working group had identified some specific limitations that the chair has just alluded to. And so our concerns are only practical. We support the energy goal, but some associations will simply not be able to accommodate this due to infrastructure limitations.
And the cost could be quite a lot for each owner on their dues. So it would be, especially for some of the lower income.
Exactly. This is a cost to consumers, people with their budgets. And I don't want to go far afield, but in the city and county of Honolulu, there's also a lot of mandate associated with fire sprinkler systems, and it all adds up, is my point.
Okay, Rep. Martin, did you have a question? Okay, I have to look at it, but if it's only for new construction, Rep. Martin's asking, sorry, is the bill as it, maybe it was, I was looking at a prior to amended version. Does this apply only to new construction?
Sorry, was that to me, Chair?
Sure, we should know the answer to that actually, but.
I apologize, but from the beginning, we wanted to focus on new construction, and our testimony throughout the various iterations of this bill has been to that effect. It remains unclear to us that it does apply only to new construction. It does talk about changes to any of its residential properties, but that's a vague term that could mean anything, and we don't think it is clear enough.
Got it. And then for a follow-up question, maybe for, I guess BIA Hawaii is not present in person, but for NIOP, maybe, Evan?
Yes, Chair.
What are your comments? I mean, what is I mean, it looks like the burden of this falls just on homeowners like after the fact of construction. Is that not your reading of the bill?
Well, our reading of the bill is that this would apply to, the plans would have to require that the EV stations are going to be installed for any new construction. So with that in mind, we're concerned that this may increase the cost of affordable housing and potentially, prevent projects from penciling out in order to accommodate the additional necessary costs in terms of infrastructure and making sure that these stalls are I believe there's a requirement for 120 to 240 volt outlets to be available, and so that increased cost is our concern.
But you would agree that between the two, if given the two options of building it into the upfront construction versus requiring homeowners to pay for retrofitting after the fact, that the more affordable option for the homeowners or for the condo owners would be for it to be built in advance?
We would see that the cost would be relatively the same, as in the homeowners eventually bear the cost. The consumers do eventually bear the cost, whether it's passed on to them by the developer.
So if I mean, I don't think that's accurate. If you build a new parking lot and you build the wiring, not necessarily the actual charging stations, but the wiring is built into the parking lot during the construction process versus building a parking lot without any of the electrical wiring. And then homeowners have to come in after the fact and retrofit to install wiring to an already constructed parking lot. The cost for that is not the same.
I unfortunately don't have the exact cost data on me between retrofitting and new construction, and I can get that to you.
Okay, well, so the answer is you don't know.
I apologize.
We've heard it's about 10 times less, but your answer, just to be clear, is that you don't know the cost comparison, not that it's the same, which you said previously.
I don't know the exact numbers.
You don't know the numbers. Okay. All right. Thanks. Any further questions, members? So we'll move on to Senate Bill 3057 relating to renewable portfolio standards. This is the RPS formula fix. First up, we have a DBET/Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair Lowen. I believe the DBET testimony was submitted for Mike McCartney, the director, and is unable to make it. So he asked me to testify on his behalf, and just that to note that they support this administrative measure. Thank you. If you'd like me to testify for HSEO as well.
Please, yeah, please carry on.
Okay, thank you. For the Energy Office as well, we do support the measure. We have recommended some changes. We actually prefer the version that the House voted out. And would request that the committee consider that version in making amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Dean Nishina, DCCA, Consumer Advocate.
Aloha and good morning, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, and members of the committee. Dean Nishina with the Division of Consumer Advocacy. You have a written testimony similar to the testimony that Mr. Glenn just provided. We are in support of the intent of the measure, but the current version has certain aspects that may require some reconsideration. Available for questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. Chair Griffin.
Morning, Chair. Yes, Commission supports this measure. I think similar to the two prior colleagues, we have concerns over some of the new language that was added, particularly page 9, lines 6 through 13. We have that in our comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Hawaiian Electric, Marcosano.
Yeah, sorry about that. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Similar to the previous testimony, we do have concerns about the provision that was added to this bill and prefer the House version HD1. There are concerns regarding, in our written testimony, regarding reliability if that new provision were to be included. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Ulupono Initiative.
Thank you, Chair. Ulupono will stand on its testimony in support.
Thank you. And then we have additional testimony from Climate Protectors Hawaii in support, Hawaii Interfaith Power and Light in support, Aloha Animal Advocates and Pelelani Farm in support, and 350 Hawaii Women's Caucus and Hawaii Clean Power Alliance in support, and 26 individuals in support. Was there anyone else here to testify on this that signed up in advance? If not, members, any questions? Great. If not, we'll move on to Senate Bill 2474. This is relating to interconnection requirements. And first up, we have DCCA, Consumer Advocate.
Aloha again, Chair Lowen. You have our written testimony. We stand on our written testimony offering comments available for questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hawaii Public Utilities Commission.
Yes, Chair. You have our written testimony. I just wanted to highlight two, I think, changes that have happened more recently. One is the commission's issued a request for information for individuals or groups that could perform this function. And so we'll evaluate the pool of potential candidates, their qualifications and their costs. So we ask that we have some ability and time to do that before being forced to commit to one. Second is that the nature of the interconnection process, particularly for utility scale projects, will likely see a major change where more of this work will be done upfront prior to the bidding. And so particularly with the section 3 subsection B5 that talks about having to act on an interconnection request within 120 days, I think if these are all submitted together, I think that imposes a near-term timeline on the commission in reviewing an entire power purchase amendment. So with that, I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Hawaiian Electric in opposition.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Hawaiian Electric is testifying in opposition of SB 2474. As we noted in our written testimony, we understand the significance and importance of the issues raised in the preamble of the bill, but we are concerned with the time and cost that could be added to the procurement of renewable projects. With this, we've committed to making improvements in our interconnection process between our stage 1 and stage 2 RFPs, and then most recently in our newest draft RFPs that we've issued, we've made many additional improvements to the interconnection process or proposed improvements. And we also note that in the PBR docket before the commission, the performance-based rate making, there is an RPSA performance incentive mechanism that was approved that incentivizes us to increase the speed of interconnection. And there are also discussions regarding other performance incentive mechanisms in this area. So we're concerned that adopting these formal standards could be too streamlined. All projects are different, and we want the ability to work with each developer and the specifics of the project. And we're afraid that if we focus on one set of standards, that may hinder us in moving forward, especially if there's specific timelines that need to be met. There may not be the flexibility needed to ensure that the projects are put online as we're expecting.
Great, thank you. And then we also have a couple additional testimonies in support from Hawaii Clean Power Alliance and Andrea Quinn. That is everyone I have signed up to testify. Are there any questions, members? Okay, we will move on. Next on the agenda, we have Senate Bill 2511. This is adding a tax credit for firm renewables to our renewable energy technologies income tax credit. And first up to testify, we have Isaac Choi, Department of Taxation.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members. Josh Michaels, on behalf of the Director of Tax, the department will stand on its testimony offering comments and happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair. The Energy Office submitted testimony with comments, noting several ambiguities in the language of the bill, as well as supporting the idea that we think the legislature is well situated to create incentives such as tax credits for desired technology changes to achieve our energy goals. And we are ready to work with you in helping refine any language that you might want to clarify. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And then we have Climate Protectors Hawaii, Ted Bolin.
Thank you, Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, members of the committee. Ted Bolin on behalf of the Climate Protectors Hawaii. We are in opposition to this bill, although it's not total opposition. It is really concerns I would express that the renewables used for tax credits not include wood biomass because that is quite harmful to the climate, and we should not be encouraging that with incentives in tax credits. So if the language is revised to bar the use of wood biomass burning, that would alleviate a lot of our concerns. More generally, while it is very important to have firm power, it is premature, I think, to prejudge that we need a certain amount of firm power or that it should be favored over intermittent power. Let's wait and see what quantities we have of intermittent power and how battery technology develops before we prejudge the issue. And I would urge amendments to the bill to reflect that point of view. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Then we have Hawaiian Electric.
Hi, good morning, Chair. Hawaiian Electric testifies in support of this bill. We did suggest some minor modifications to the language in our testimony. Firm generation will be very important in renewable firm generation and moving forward towards the renewable energy goals. And we believe that this bill will help us in procuring reasonably cost firm energy for our future. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Tax Foundation of Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair Lowen and members of the committee. Jade McMillan on behalf of the Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We will stand on our written comments submitted on the measure. Thank you.
Thank you, and good to see you, Jade. That's everyone we have signed up to submit testimony in person. We also have testimony with comments from Department of Budget and Finance, from Hawaii Bioeconomy Trade Organization in support, 350 Hawaii in opposition, PAR Hawaii in support, and 17 individuals in support and 1 in opposition. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? If not, members, any questions? I have a question for, who should I ask? Maybe Hawaii State Energy Office or Hawaiian Electric. We, for years, have gone back and forth on this tax credit and whether there should be a sunset date on it. As far as this piece relating to firm renewables, do you believe there should be a sunset added? And if so, what should the date be?
Chair, we don't have a firm opinion on that, if you will, and we frankly defer to the legislature on deciding for how long and how much money you think is appropriate to allocate. We do think that the more funds that you make available for incentives, the more we can have more renewable energy technologies. And the concept of firm, as we noted in our testimony, is a little ambiguous. So having some kind of clarification on what technologies would be part of that, or overlapping or kind of new technologies that are emerging, how they might be classified, creates some challenges, which is why we had commented on the ambiguity about it.
Got it. If we have I guess a follow-up question, and Rebecca, feel free to jump in as well. If we have a 2045 date to have 100% renewables, do you think there would still be a purpose to have this tax credit following that date? Or at that point, I mean, if it was something that far out, would it be time to do away with tax credits? or at least reconsider, have a, fail safe in law to reconsider it by say 2040 or 2045?
Chair, that's an interesting question. The tax credits right now are for renewable energy. They're not necessarily tied directly to electricity production. And so, the 2045 goal for the renewable portfolio standard is expressly about electricity, but that's only a portion of the total energy transition that Hawaii has to go through. So to the extent the legislature is considering these energy technologies to support transportation changes, then it might be worth considering them either being around past 2045, or we put in place requirements to transition our transportation energy use as well.
Okay, got it.
I agree with, I agree with a lot of what Scott said. I also just want to note that firm technologies have a longer development timeline than intermittent technologies. So if we're looking at a procurement of a firm resource from the time the procurement is run till it's actually in service can be, 7 to 10 years. So just taking that into account, that the sunset, I would think should be farther out to account for the fact that they won't actually reach in service for quite some time after procurement.
Rebecca, follow-up question for you as well. Like we recently basically repealed the portion of this tax credit that would apply to some of the utility scale intermittent resources. Well, two questions, I guess. One, the longer timeline, is that more related to utility scale versus the customer sited resources? I mean, is there really that much longer for a firm renewable project that is utility scale versus intermittent utility scale project? I think they're both pretty long timelines, but given that we recently repealed the utility scale tax credit for the intermittent renewables, basically based on the industry's request that it was too much uncertainty, not knowing if we were going to be talking about a sunset date at the legislature every year. And also that it wasn't needed necessarily because the price of the intermittent renewables is basically the cheapest on the market right now. But is it fair to have the tax credit now for one and not the other?
I think that it is appropriate to incentivize firm generation. It's typically more expensive to build. It is a longer time frame. I think intermittent generation can be put in the system between 3 to 5 years. Utility scale, the permits required for firm generation, those are take much longer to procure, and so the permitting process adds a lot of time to firm generator. I think that the tax credit served its purpose for utility scale. I think from the utilities perspective, we would have been okay if those had been extended and not sunset to encourage further development of those renewables. But those technologies did, at least until recent times, see a lower cost to build those. But we haven't seen that same price decrease on the firm renewable side yet. So I think incentivizing and those projects would be helpful.
Okay, all right. Any other questions, members? Rep. Martin, go ahead.
I have a question for the Hawaii State Energy Office. We do have in place the mandate for the state being carbon neutral by 2045. Do you folks think that does not include transportation?
Thank you, Vice Chair Martin. The statute you're referencing is 225P, which is the zero emissions clean economy target. That is an economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions target. So I would say it does include transportation and is to sequester more than we emit. In the case of the renewable portfolio standard, that is only for electricity. Was that answering your question?
Kind of, yes.
Well, I'll follow up. I mean, presumably if we have a 2045 target, and it may not be as regulatory as the RPS, but like that would include the transportation transition. It's economy wide. So where we have a goal for 2045 for that as well.
And that's a good point. And in that case,
To your comments earlier.
Yeah.
I don't think this tax credit, I think this tax credit is about energy generation, and there's a separate renewable fuel tax credit we're discussing this session. So I don't think that it would have, I'm trying to envision what you mean when you say that there would be energy, there would be a use for this tax credit not related to energy generation that was related to transportation. It would still be energy generation for transportation, just not for powering. It'd still be electricity generation for transportation. I don't think it would be like a fuel source. I don't know if that makes sense anyway.
Yes, I think I understand. Yes.
I think Rep. Martin raised a good point.
Yes.
Okay, we will move on to Senate Bill 2283. This is Hawaii Hydrogen Strategic Plan. First up to testify, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair. And this bill really kind of tees up the conversation we just had on the previous bill. We offered testimony with comments noting that it would be helpful to have a deeper understanding of hydrogen, but that also this should be part of a larger understanding of how hydrogen fits into our other energy efforts that we're doing.
Thank you. And then Rick Rochlow, University of Hawaii, HNEI.
Chair, Vice Chair, thank you for this opportunity. We have offered written testimony, and it's very consistent with what we just heard from Mr. Glenn, that it needs to be considered in light of all the energy other planning going on within the state to identify the benefits, potential benefits of hydrogen. Thank you very much, and I'll be available for questions.
Thank you. Hawaiian Electric.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Hawaiian Electric stands on its written testimony support. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Ted Bolin, Climate Protectors Hawaii.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ted Bolin for Climate Protectors Hawaii. Climate Protectors have concern about this bill. It's fine to study hydrogen. It's good. We should study it. But the bill seems to presume that the results of that study are going to be that we should have a strategic plan to develop hydrogen, which I don't think is, I think that's putting the cart before the horse. Let's wait and see what the study says before we go into Section B and develop a strategic plan. We've heard testimony this morning that hydrogen seems probably to be better for steel, for medium and heavy industry. I think in this they mean steel, cement, fertilizers. It's not so clear that it's appropriate for transportation. That's something that can be studied as well. And finally, the concern is that, again, as I've said on some other bills, to produce hydrogen from local renewable source of wood burning would not be good for the climate, would not be consistent with the state's goals for decarbonization, and should be excluded from one of the potentials use of hydrogen. Local renewable resources are great for producing hydrogen, just don't use ones that are bad for the climate. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we have Hawaii Gas, Julie Yunker.
Hey, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Jill Yunker on behalf of Hawaii Gas. We'll stand on our written testimony in support of this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have additional testimony from two individuals from Servco Pacific and Ulupono and Alliance for Automotive Action in support. And was there anyone I missed who signed up to testify? If not, members, any questions? Quick question for Rick. There's no appropriation in this bill, so just clarifying, you guys have ample funds from your generous allocation of barrel tax to do this study?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay, great, thanks. Next on the agenda, we have Senate Bill 2535. And this is relating to offshore wind. First up, we have Hawaii State Energy Office, Scott Glenn.
Aloha Chair, the Energy Office submitted comments on this bill. We've been doing a lot of work examining the potential of offshore wind, and we think there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. We did appreciate that the ST2 blanked out the number of miles and that more analysis is needed before really knowing what a right number might be for a setback. Offshore wind has a lot of steps to go, and similar to what was discussed for firm power, it's on a 7 to 10 or more year timeline. And just noting that the first wind farm also took about 10 years to build. So this will take a lot of time to figure out. So we think there is value in doing some more research before really putting a number down. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hawaii Public Utilities Commission, Chair Griffin.
Yes, sure. I will stand on our written testimony offering comments. Thank you. Available for any questions.
Thank you. And then Hawaiian Electric, Rebecca Dehab Matsushima.
Morning, Chair. We stand on our written testimony offering comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have 2 additional individuals in opposition, 1 in support. Was there anyone I missed who wanted to testify on this measure? If not, members' questions? All right, I'll ask a question, I guess, for Energy Office. I know the original number in this bill, I think, was 12 miles. And I guess there's just some concern that, you know, once we put a number like that in statute, we're taking off the table a lot of potential future options completely without even knowing what those might be. What's your comment on that? Like, what could we stand to lose by putting this in law today?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. The conversation around wind, I think, is a pretty sensitive conversation in the state right now, and given especially folks' experience with Napua Makani. So we do think it's important to have a carefully thought out conversation around this, and that there probably is a role for a setback of a certain amount. But what it is, it's still unknown. We just did a study with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory on examining the potential locations around the island of Oahu for offshore wind and what the various costs, technology, feasibility pieces might be. That's not a sufficient look for any real decision making. There's still a lot of environmental, cultural, social, and other types of factors that need to be examined that have not been or either in the process of being examined. So we think that setting a number in the sense of what might be lost is that we don't know how near or how far out the technology can go at this point, but we're also not on the cusp of having something built, in which case there's not a pressing need to have a number in place.
Got it. Any further questions, members? Okay. We will move on to Senate Bill 2483. This is making some amendments to the Hawaii State Planning Act relating to energy-related planning. And first up to testify, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair. For this bill, we submitted testimony with comments. We appreciated the amendments that the Senate inserted into the SD2, which were largely along the lines of some of the amendments we had requested. So for these particular edits, we think they are helpful clarifiers of the renewable energy purpose of our energy systems in the State Planning Act. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Rick Rochelo, HNEI.
Chair, Vice Chair, thank you again. We stand on our written testimony offering some comments, supporting the intent of this bill, but making some minor comments and adjustments. Thank you very much. And I will be available for questions.
Thank you. And Hawaiian Electric.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Our primary concern with this bill is the potential to raise costs for customers. As noted in our written testimony, and I'm here to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tahiri Power, Sandy Wong.
Yes, good morning again, Chair Lowen. Sandy Wong on behalf of Tahiri Power. We support the intent of this bill and we will stand on our written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have 17 additional individuals in support. That is everyone we have signed up to testify in person. Any questions, members? Let's see. I guess, Rick, same question for you as with the prior bill you testified on. I think this bill does include an appropriation, but given that you already have funds sitting there from barrel tax that you have access to, do you need a separate appropriation for this?
Chair, no, we don't. In our written testimony, we suggest that appropriation language be removed and just request us to do the study should this go through. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then I guess Hawaiian Electric, will you clarify about your opposition and which parts you think would raise concerns about cost to customers?
Yeah, part of the bill has language regarding essentially it's requiring us to do an uneconomic dispatch. So in the near term, prior to reaching 100% renewable energy, the bill may require us to dispatch more expensive generators ahead of generators that may be lower cost at that time. So that in effect would raise costs to customers.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thanks. Members, any questions? Okay, moving on to Senate Bill 2510. We do have a number of people signed up to testify in person on this. So for this bill, we are going to do a 2-minute time limit. So if everyone can try to keep their questions concise, because there's also, I have a number of questions about this bill as well. So we want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A for everybody. And my vice chair is going to be the timer. She's going to work on it. So Senate Bill 2510 relating to renewable energy. This is establishing specific percentages in the State Planning Act for renewable energy generation. First up, we have Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair Lowen. The Hawaii State Energy Office testified in opposition to this bill. There are parts of it that we are not opposed to, but overall we think it is an inappropriate arrangement of the agencies and their responsibilities for energy and energy planning. And we're available for any questions to further expand on our testimony if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Good morning, Chair and Vice Chair. This is Mary Alice Evans, Director for the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. We'll stand on our written testimony with comments, but I'd like to note that we also believe that the bill with the proposed language in Section 6, subsections D, E, and F, does change the original intent of the law, which makes the state agency head primarily responsible for a functional area, responsible for updating the functional plan in the area. The Office of Planning prefers its original role of providing guidelines as required in Chapter 22656, subsection B, and we defer to the Hawaii State Energy Office on Section 9. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And next up, Dean Nishina, Consumer Advocate under DCCA.
Aloha again, Chair. We stand on our written testimony offering comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Rick Rochelo, University of Hawaii.
Thank you very much. I also stand on my comments, but would like to make one comment. Our analysis of the grid systems does indicate, based on available technology today, that we will need very significant capacity to ensure reliability, grid firm capacity. The amount of energy that will be required from that firm capacity will depend very significantly on how much renewable, intermittent, or variable renewables, potentially lower cost sources are on that grid. In light of that, we believe that specifying a specific energy content of firm energy may preclude the most economic development of the transition of our energy system. So thank you, and I'll be available for comments.
Thank you. And then Brandon Wolf, ILWU.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to testify. ILW stands in strong support of SB 2510 Senate Draft 2. Mahalo.
Thank you. And then we have Sandy Wong, Tahiri Power.
Yes, thank you again. Good morning, Chair Lowen. Tahiri Power submitted written testimony. We are in strong opposition to this bill. We believe that if this bill passes, it is a total step backwards for the state in regards to renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Practical Policy Institute of Hawaii, Clint Churchill.
Chair Lowen, Vice Chair Martin, our testimony speaks for itself, but I would like to make a couple of brief comments. While there are positive aspects to this bill, there are major flaws. Achieving 100% renewable needs to be practical in our viewpoint, and that means considering dependability, affordability, as well as land use. So the first major flaw is the 55% firm renewable. That in effect excludes intermittent wind and solar. So what is that going to be? Is that a requirement for 55% biofuel or hydrogen? There's nothing at all in the bill that talks about battery storage coupled with solar, perhaps coupled with wind. And it effectively ties the hands of the PUC. That's their responsibility to assure firm power, to assure dependability, yet take into account cost and the affordability to the ratepayer. So on that alone, the bill should not move forward. The second major flaw is diversification. Normally sounds good, but the 45% renewable from any one type, let's set aside the neighbor islands that have other options. We've got to provide power to 1 million people on Oahu, and if we're going to convert vehicles to power being powered through the grid as well, having a limitation of one source just doesn't seem to make any sense. If we could well be, and it's looking to us like we're heading towards a high percentage of solar. So reaching 45% limit on one renewable source, such as solar, what do? You shut down an entire industry. So on that score as well, we think this bill should not move forward. HECO has a complex, comprehensive, integrated planning process underway. They just last week came out with an RFP process for up to 700 megawatts to find out what might be out there on other sources other than wind and solar. So there's simply
sorry, that was the 2 minutes.
no reason to rush this. Let's let things play out.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Hawaiian Electric offering comments.
Yep. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. We do submit several comments regarding Section 2 of the bill. We're not taking a position on other portions of the bill, but we're really focused on the idea of having a diversified energy portfolio. As Mr. Rashilo noted, firm generation will be needed in order to achieve 100% reliably. So we are looking at options to do that. We provide amendments that do provide flexibility for all types of renewables, including firm, and the percentage that we do offer provides sufficient flexibility because we are changing we're suggesting a modification to change it as a percent of capacity rather than energy. But I'll be available for further questions on this and clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ted Bolin, Climate Protectors Hawaii, in opposition.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Ted Bolin for Climate Protectors Hawaii. Climate Protectors are strongly opposed to this bill. It seems to be very unwise. I agree with some of the previous testimony to have the statute basically set limits, rigid numbers like 55% and 45% is a bad idea. We will know a lot more about where we are as we go forward in the future. We should wait until we have that information, not set some kind of limit in advance. We should let the PUC do its job, which is to determine the best public interest combination of power sources and contracts, and not set this up in advance from the legislature. With due respect to the legislature, I think these are complex issues and best decided by the agencies with the expertise at the time when they have the full information. The other basis for our opposition is, again, that burning wood to generate renewable power is bad for the climate and bad for the state of Hawaii and should not be considered as an option here under the firm renewable power. If you have firm renewable power with a lot of wood, you're going to have a lot of greenhouse gases and a lot of global warming, and that's bad for Hawaii and the world. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And then we have Susan Ignacio from ILWU. Susan, are you present? Not present. Okay, next we have Brian Barbata, individual. Next we have John White.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. First, let me thank you guys for holding a public hearing. I really appreciate that. I stand in strong support of 2510, and I just urge everyone to consider accepting and supporting all types of firm, renewable, and intermittent power. Thank you. Have a great day. Aloha.
Thank you. And then Cisco Vallejo. Keenan Luke.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I stand by my written testimony on strong support of SB 2510. Thank you for your time. Aloha.
Thank you. Edward Klaneski.
Aloha, this is Eddie Clemens. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, go ahead. Thank
Yeah,
you.
mahalo. Okay, mahalo, Chair and members of the committee for letting me speak today. My name is Eddie Klemeski. As I stated, I'm a resident of Manoa. I'm also in strong support of Bill SB 2510 and firm renewable energy for the state of Hawaii. Living here in Hawaii, I feel like we should try to utilize all forms of renewable energy instead of, just relying on a few that we currently rely on, like such as solar and wind. I also feel firm renewable energy is something that we can produce locally and in turn create some local jobs and stimulate our economy. Anyway, mahalo again for your time and allowing me to speak today. Aloha.
Thank you. Next we have Zorik Palimo'o.
Can you hear me good?
Can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and members of this committee for letting me speak. My name is Zorik Palimo, a resident of Oahu, and I am in strong support of my Senate Bill 2510. I believe this bill will propel Hawaii towards becoming global leaders in clean energy by firmly utilizing geothermal, hydroelectric, solar, wind, and the burning of organic matter. We can move Hawaii towards clean energy future. Mahalo again for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Zorit. Next, we have Chauncey Denauer. Not present. Blair Nahale.
Hi, aloha, Chair. Everybody hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee for letting me speak today. My name is Blair Nahale, and I stand by my written testimony in strong support of SB 2510. Thank you for letting me speak today. Aloha.
Thank you. Next, we have Kaena Paikai. Next, we have Keikoa Masutani. Noah Campbell. Jay Amina. Manny Kulualani. Richard Gideon. Richard Gideon.
Good morning, aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I stand by my written testimony in strong support of Senate Bill 2510. I believe Hawaii needs to utilize all forms of renewable energy, and I stand by strong support of SB 2510. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, Seth Holk. Seth Holk. Okay, we'll move on.
Hi, thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
I stand strongly on Senate Bill 2510. Thank you.
Mahalo. And we have Shore Padilla.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I stand on my written testimony in strong support of 2510. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have just Gabriel, no last name. Chris Tanaka.
Hey, good morning, Chair.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me this time to speak. My name is Chris Tanaka. I'm born and raised on the windward side of Oahu, and I'm a resident of Kaneohe. I stand on my written testimony in strong support of SB 2510 and firm renewable energy for Hawaii. I believe that Hawaii needs to utilize all forms of renewable energy instead of one or two sources we currently rely on. Firm renewable energy is more reliable than solar and wind. Firm renewable energy is something we can produce locally and in turn create local jobs to stimulate the economy. The rising cost of energy will be detrimental to our local people and add to the long list of reasons living here in Hawaii is too expensive for these born and raised here. Firm renewable, locally produced energy will allow for some relief. Thank you for your time and giving me an opportunity to speak. Aloha.
Mahalo. And next we have Trey, no last name.
Hello.
Go ahead, Trey.
Hi, thank you, Chair and members of the community.
for letting me speak today. I'm a resident of Honolulu, Hawaii, and I stand strong on my written testimony in support of SB 2510. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then next we have Douglas Hugh.
Aloha, Chair and Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm a resident of Kapolei, Hawaii, born and raised on the island. Wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I stand in strong support of SB 2510. Mahalo for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Louis Manzanas Jr. Let's see, I missed someone here. Seth Eli. Seth.
Good morning. Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I stand on my written testimony and I in strong support of SB 2510. Thank you for your guys' time.
Okay, just for our record, your name on the Zoom says Douglas. Are you Seth or Douglas?
I'm Seth.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Chad Amasu. And Bert Chun.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Hello. Okay, thank you, Chair and members of the committee for letting me speak. My name is Bert Chun and I'm a resident of Ewa Beach. I stand on my written testimony in strong support of SB 2510. Thank you for your time and giving me the time to speak. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you for your testimony. I believe that is everyone I had that was signed up to testify in person. Is there anyone else who signed up in advance that I missed? No? Okay. Okay, members, questions? Rep. Russo.
I have a question for ILWU.
Just gonna look at this first.
Whoever is officially representing ILWU.
Is that Brett?
I think I have Brandon. As
Brandon,
the first one.
Brandon Wolf. Okay.
Is there anybody willing to answer questions from ILWU? Is there? Okay, seeing none.
Okay, sorry, just to say that a little louder in case anyone didn't hear, is there anyone from ILWU who can answer questions on behalf of the organization? Okay, okay. Well, we'll follow up offline perhaps. Other members' questions, Rep. Tokioka?
Is the PUC on?
They did not submit testimony, but the consumer advocate did, if you want to ask them, or the energy office.
I know they were on earlier. I thought that maybe they might still be on. I know they, they didn't submit testimony, but if they're not here, then that's okay.
Other members' questions? I guess I have some questions for, maybe I'll start with consumer advocates. I think, of course, there's a need for firm energy, and of course we have a goal to get to 100% renewable, and that we are in fact ahead of. But I guess the question I have about this bill is putting these specific prescriptive percentages into state law. Could that lead to potentially bad outcomes for customers, in that not allowing the PUC the flexibility to figure out that balance of what is the right balance of to reach the goals, affordability, reliability, reducing reliance on imports, et cetera, that's already in state law under the PUC. Will this kind of put a wrench in their being able to do their job and ensure the best outcome for customers. I'm worried about the impact this could have on customer bills if we mandate there has to be certain percentages of certain resources without looking at these on a project by project basis and considering that in the bigger picture of, you know, grid planning and how to reach our other goals.
Chair Lowen, thank you for your question. I think
You're very faint. Can you talk?
Sorry about that. I'm sorry, my microphone was up. Yeah, no, thank you for that very insightful question. I think, you know, the points you raise is one that we try to convey in our testimony, in the sense that each island has specific, say, specific loads. They have specific resources, and setting, you know, a fixed number across all the islands will actually reduce the ability for the commission and our office to determine what might be the best optimal and cost-effective means of reaching 100%. So again, you know, with the notion of trying to meet the 100%, we will of course pay attention to reliability, but we'd also like to take a path that makes sense for consumers rather than having fixed numbers that may end up having customer bills be higher than they might be otherwise.
Okay, thank you. And maybe for the energy office and or consumer advocate, in addition to energy generation, we have other kind of resources on the grid, including storage, potentially including demand response kind of programs and customer sited resources as well. Do you think the legislature should decide what percent of each one, like should we decide today what percent of each one in perpetuity of those types of resources that we should have on the grid?
I'll answer first if that's all right, Dean. Chair, thanks for the question. Could I actually take a step back for a moment to talk a little bit about how this bill might actually work?
Sure.
The State Planning Act is a guidance document to the functional agencies for what they should take into account as they do their work and do decision making. And in general, it's a collection of very broad-based statements and goals that doesn't have targets and specific numbers in it. And so inserting a specific target in the State Planning Act in general is inconsistent with how the State Planning Act is structured. And I think the folks who are supporting this insertion see it in some way as telling an agency what it must do. And that's not how the State Planning Act generally works. However, what this bill does is it proposes to have the Office of Planning be able to effectively overrule the Public Utilities Commission in its decision making, and by effect taking energy policy from the PUC and putting it in the Office of Planning. Where I think the conversation in your question goes to is that there is a mechanism, it is the Public Utilities Commission, and a docket could be opened up to set a firm percent renewable target through the PUC. And inserting the language in the statute in the State Planning Act would not achieve the desired outcome that supporters of this bill are looking for, even if you guys were to do that. So I would say in short, it's not appropriate to set a percent target today. And even doing it here in this bill through this particular act would not achieve the outcome folks are looking for, that rather it belongs in 269 and it belongs in the PUC process.
Thanks. And then maybe for Hawaiian Electric, you know, everyone who submits testimony has, I think, their own angle on, you know, what specific projects, how they could benefit. And I think Hawaiian Electric as a privately owned company is probably no different. But if we kind of turn this around and say, you know, should the legislature tell you what percent of your, you know, grid resources have to be customer sided generation, and what percent of your grid resources have to be demand response programs, and what percent of your grid resources must be wind and solar, and what percent must be firm renewables? Would you be comfortable with that? Do you feel like we as a legislature have the expertise basically overrule your entire grid planning process?
Yeah, so I think that wouldn't be preferable. And in our suggested amendments, we do suggest striking some of the language that requires 45% of any one single technology. But what we are offering is that to establish or recognize that firm renewable generation will be needed, we did offer an amendment to require a minimum of 50%, and that's of capacity. I think the current language of the bill implies that it should come from energy, but the value of capacity is to be available whenever we need it. You know, for example, if it's a cloudy day or there's a a storm or natural disaster that comes through and we're going to need it for emergency purposes to reliably serve the grid. So that's really the intent of the amendments that we're offering.
So, well, I guess, first of all, I don't think anyone has ever, no one opposes firm renewables. And it may be that the optimal balance on the grid is 50% or 45%, but absolutely nothing is preventing you from getting to that percentage if that is what, pans out to be in the best interest, the best decision per your company, and then approved by the PUC, with their task of balancing their directives from state law, which include balancing affordability and reliability, ensuring reliability, doing the most cost-effective way, assuring, the lower greenhouse gas emissions and reducing reliance on imports. So there's nothing preventing you from having X percent of firm renewables if that is what is determined to be in the best interest in a bigger picture consideration of all these factors.
Yeah, we would go through we're regulated by the PUC, so that would go through that process. I think what this bill does, it more explicitly recognizes the idea that we should have a diverse resource portfolio, as well as that including firm generation as a matter of state policy.
So currently, does Hawaiian Electric have geothermal resources currently?
Yes, on Hawaii Island.
And do you have hydroelectric?
Yes, we do. A small portion of the portfolio's hydro.
And you have wind and solar?
Yes.
And you have customer-sided resources that you integrate?
Yes.
And there's some battery projects. There's a lot of solar, intermittent resources that also have batteries, but also some standalone battery projects in development.
Correct. Yeah.
And some demand response programs.
Yes.
So it looks like you have a diversified portfolio.
Yeah, I do think that we
yes, you is that a yes?
We do have a diverse portfolio, but we are in the process of trying to we recently issued a draft RFP for firm renewable generation, and we'd like to see that move forward.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's going through the proper process at the PUC, and I think that's appropriate, and we support that. I support that anyway. So yeah, I think I support the PUC doing their job as well. Rep. Caruso, go ahead.
So I'm gonna actually ask either Mary Alice Evans or Scott Glenn. I'm just looking for someone who has a big picture kind of perspective on this whole conversation, who can help me understand or help us understand the labor related testimony, because we receive so much of it. And I feel like I just need to have that be part of the conversation explicitly. So, and I just have some quick clarifying questions. When I spoke to ILWU, they mentioned that their strong concern and strong support for this measure was linked to, in particular, Huhonua. I wanted to get a sense if you folks know how many jobs we're talking about at Huhonua. Either of you, anybody.
Representative, this is Mary Alice. I don't have an answer to your question, so I'm going to defer to Scott and see if he might have a better fix on that.
Thanks. And Mary Alice, feel free to jump in as I'm offering a response. Rep. Russo, I don't have an exact number on a job connection for you. So that for the immediate proximate number, I don't have. But to step back and look at the labor connection, when we talk about firm power, I think that this is not an exhaustive list, but it tends to be things like geothermal, hydro, pump storage hydro, biomass, biodiesel, some type of bioenergy, as generally what's considered to be firm. But that's an evolving kind of state-of-the-art issue right now. But the labor connection is that the different types of renewable energy technologies draw on different labor unions. And so depending on what technology is being discussed or considered, those particular unions will be the ones to work on that project. And so I think what you're seeing is testimony from unions that see more opportunities for their benches to work on projects that are considered firm, because these are the particular unions that tend to benefit from that work. Other unions are involved in solar or wind or other types of things. And I think there's a rough bucketing of what's kind of electricity oriented versus kind of steel and heavy equipment and other types of things like that. I don't want to speak for the unions though, so please take that with a grain of salt. But you know, the Energy Office supports all kinds of renewable energy technologies, and rather from our perspective, we don't think it's as productive to engage in a firm versus intermittent versus rather we prefer to engage in the actual technologies themselves: geothermal, hydro, pump storage hydro, battery, solar, utility scale, rooftop. And then from there, try to craft policies that help support the goals that are recognizing that those particular issues around those technologies.
Okay, then I do have a question for Mary Alice Evans, if you don't mind, Chair.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I noticed there's a definite opposition between the environmentalist testimony and the labor testimony. And I wonder, as part of your work in the Office of Sustainability and Development, if you are planning a sustainable development, if you folks are looking at the need to plan for a just transition, so helping workers kind of retool so that we're supporting the needs of those working families and having good jobs and retraining. If there's so much opposition to burning, and it's, you know, burning of organic matter and so on, and in particular of wood, then is there in your office any attention to this problem of transitioning the labor force?
Representative Prusso, that we absolutely do support the workforce reskilling and opportunities for people to look for higher wage jobs when they can. And so that's incorporated into all of our planning efforts. But, you know, some of the best wages in Hawaii are union wages. So I don't think that supporting union-based projects is detrimental to working families being able to stay here and be able to afford to stay here.
No, that's not my point. Like, I'm a unionist. I'm not saying that because
okay.
I think that with okay, so I think we must have misunderstood my question, but I was talking about different kinds of work. So whether like the work around all of our transition should be unionized, in my view. And maybe that's something we need to work on. But I'm talking about these folks who testified, who seem to be highly motivated to protect firm energy, which seems to me to be really uncomfortable for a lot of environmentalists. So I'm asking, like, if there are efforts in play already to help those folks move along with us to a different kind of energy future. Because I see the firm energy conversation as being very much rooted in the status quo.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Rep. Russo, may I offer?
Please.
So the Energy Office is doing workforce reskilling as well. We're working with the Office of Planning, the community colleges, the university, and the the economic development boards and workforce councils. One of the pieces of the just transition discussion is that, as Mary Alice was just saying, it is pretty much the case that if you work in a present day fossil fuel facility, you are a high skilled, highly paid worker. And most of the jobs that come with solar and wind do not translate to those skills. And most of the jobs that come with things like geothermal, biodiesel, biomass, pump storage, hydro do translate to those skills. And so that I think is the connection you're seeing. And as we transition, we are retiring fossil fuel plants. And we have actually a present day situation going on with the coal plant, where we've been actively engaged with AES, with their workers. In the case of AES, for example, they're an international global company, and they've been able to offer positions to their employees around the state and in other locations. But my understanding is there's still people who either have chosen not to take advantage of that or still have challenges. And so we are cognizant of that. We think it's an important piece of the puzzle. And I don't mean that in a lighthearted way. It's a really challenging question that there's a lot of families that will be affected by this transition, and we are trying to look at ways to help them through it. And a lot of these families have a certain standard of living that they're able to enjoy because of their work and their skills tied to fossil fuel work. And they shouldn't be held personally against them for that work that they've done. We've needed it. We still need it today, fossil fuel. We are not at a point where we're ready to say aloha to all fossil fuels. So, there is, I think, a transition underway, and we do need to be more cognizant of it. And then just on the kind of intermittent side, the offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, utility, rooftop, all of those types of technologies. What we're finding in our own research is that the companies that do those projects tend to hire local for those types of jobs up to middle management. And then the project developers, the leads, the folks are usually some type of connection to a corporate head office outside the islands. Or if they're doing a really advanced technology, we don't have that skilled labor in the state. And so that's something we're looking to work with the community colleges to help promote, is getting people, electricians and other types of unions, to get reskilled into being able to work with these really advanced technologies that we're starting to see in projects, so that they can get those jobs here and we don't have to bring people from the continent to fill them.
Thank you so much. That was a very thoughtful response and exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, no, I think that's a helpful thing to think about, and that we have to, I think, just be cognizant that we need to work on that workforce training piece, and as the energy system transitions, make sure we're training people to have those jobs locally. But at the same time, we can't, we have to also make sure it doesn't come at the expense of customers who pay electric bills by forcing through projects that will cost a lot more for everybody, including, those people whose jobs, are concerned about their jobs. So anyway, that's a good conversation. Any further questions, members? All right, if not,
Chair Lowen?
Decision making. Yes, Dean.
Sorry, I was able to look it up real quickly to respond to Representative Caruso's questions. Huhonua estimates that their facility will generate about 40 plant operation jobs, And there will be other indirect jobs across the state up to around 300 if approved and in full operation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks for that. All right, we will recess for decision making. All right, we are back reconvening Energy and Environmental Protection Committee, 9 a.m. agenda for decision making. First up, we have SB 2720. For this bill, we will adopt the PUC's suggested amendments regarding appropriations. There's some technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style, and we will defect the date and pass this forward. Otherwise, mostly as is. Members, any discussion? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2720 with slight amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Hashem.
Aye.
Representative Matayoshi.
Aye.
Representative Peruso.
Aye.
Representative Todd.
Aye.
Representative Tokioka.
Aye.
Representative Matsumoto.
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. For SB 2570 hydrogen fueling station rebates, so instead of splitting the EV charging system funding up with this new proposal, we're just going to create a separate but parallel program for hydrogen fueling station incentives. We're going to clarify they are available to hydrogen refueling stations that only store and dispense renewable hydrogen. And so similar to the EVCS program, we'll create a separate sub-account under the PUC special fund. And then we'll add a section to fund this program. So to do that funding, we will reduce HNEI's barrel tax allocation from 8 cents to 5 cents. And we'll take that 3 cents, move it over to the new hydrogen rebate program. And this is because HNEI always has extra funds and doesn't seem to be able to use them all. And then this program will be available for systems installed or upgraded after December 31st, 2022. We'll add a definition of renewable hydrogen as hydrogen produced entirely from renewable sources that have life cycle emissions of no more than 50 grams of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour. We'll make some technical amendments and the date is already defective. So members, any discussion? Brett Matayoshi.
Yeah, I'll be voting no on this. I still feel like carbon is kind of the beta to the VHS of electric. And while I do appreciate the separate program, I just feel that any kind of money that goes towards hydrogen here should really just be put towards electric. We need to kind of go all in on electric. So no vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2570 with reservations. Chair, Vice Chair votes aye. Representative Matayoshi votes no. Are there any additional no's or reservations?
Reservations for Peruso.
Peruso has reservations. Tokioka reservations. Matsumoto reservations. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. SB 2196, electric vehicle charging systems and multi-unit dwellings. So in this bill, we're going to change the wording from zero emission fueling stations to zero emissions infrastructure and refer to stations as systems. I think that is a broader terminology. And then we're going to add a new section under Chapter 196, primarily because this is essentially tasking condo owners with paying, forcing them to pay for installing this EV infrastructure after the fact of construction, which we know is far, far more expensive than installing it at the time of construction. And so we're going to add a new section under Chapter 196 for zero emission vehicle infrastructure in new multifamily residential buildings after January 1st, 2023. No new building permits shall be issued for any new multifamily residential building with 10 or more parking stalls unless the stalls are EV charger ready. And then we'll add a definition of EV charger ready that keeps it at a minimum of 15 amp 120 volt circuit. So that means it's a little less expensive because that would accommodate a level 1 charger at a minimum. They could always do more. And then the data is already defective. So with that, any discussion, members? All right, if not, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2196 SD2 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Are there any no's or reservations? Hearing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
All right, Senate Bill 3057. We will essentially take this back to similar to House version, although not exactly. So we're gonna, the main changes are just on page 9, lines 6 through 13. We'll delete this language based on the objections of Hawaiian Electric. And then we'll make some small changes, small technical amendments and changing the wording from saying the electric utility to an electric utility because there's more than one electric utility and other technical amendments, and the date is already defective. So members, any questions? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Voting on SB 3057, SD2. Chair recommends passing with amendments. Seeing all members present, are there any noes or objection or reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. For Senate Bill 2474, we're going to make some changes to this. First, in the purpose clause, we're going to strike through lines 11 through 13. This is just saying the legislature believes that current delays in deployment of renewable energy projects may cause electric grid reliability issues, simply because I don't think there's so much reliability issues as issues of transitioning off of coal to using more oil, which we want to avoid, but you know, it won't cause a reliability issue. And then we are also going to keep a lot of what's already here, but we will take out the 270-day specific deadline in here and let this be determined by the commission in their rulemaking. So then we'll also remove subsection 5 on page 8 because that relates to the specific timelines. And then for section 5, which is the electric reliability administrator, is that section 5? We're going to remove that language because the commission just opened a docket to look at an RFI to look at whether it would make sense to have a separate entity to handle the interconnection questions, or whether that would actually create more bureaucracy and delay and cost. So we'll let the PUC look at that issue through their currently newly established docket. And the date, we'll defect the date on this to July 1st, 2100. And that is all. Members, any comments or questions? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2474 SD2 with amendments. Seeing all members are present, are there any noes or reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Great. SB 2511, this is adding firm renewables to the Renewable Energy Technologies Income Tax Credit. Page 4, lines 9 through 12, we're just going to amend that definition of firm renewable energy to say firm renewable energy means a renewable energy technology system available on the demand of the energy systems operator, consistent with the terms of an approved power purchase agreement. We will, per the Energy Office's testimony, refer to the definition of renewable in section 269-91. And then we'll also take Hawaiian Electric suggested amendments. And we will add a sunset clause to have this entire tax credit sunset in 2045. There's additional technical amendments and the date is already defective. And that is all. Members, any discussion? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2511 SD2 with amendments. Seeing all members are present, are there any noes or reservations? Hearing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. For Senate Bill 2238, we had a similar bill passed out of the House, and so we're going to make changes to this kind of similar to the changes that we made to that one. So we're changing all the references to hydrogen to renewable hydrogen, adding a definition of renewable hydrogen, making some amendments to the scope of the study to reduce some of the redundancy and clarify that this should be looked at in the context of other energy resources. We will add requirements to look at safety and to look at storage issues related to hydrogen. And then again, we'll clarify that this will be considered in the context of other resources and used to inform other energy planning and decarbonization efforts. We will remove the requirement to do a plan every 4 years. I think first we need to see the results of the study before we commit to that. Technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style, and the date is already defective. So with that, members, any discussion? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2283 SD2 with amendments. Seeing all members are present, are there any noes or reservations? Representative Matayoshi reservations? Any others? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2535 relating to offshore wind. We're going to defer this just based on testimony and some of the questions that came up during discussion. SB 2483 relating to energy planning. This bill and the next bill, SB 2510, are both amending the same sections of statute. So what we're going to do is take some of the language from SB 2483 and incorporate that into some of the amendments we're making to SB 2510. So for SB 2483, we'll remove sections 1 and 2 and only retain the study portion of this. We'll remove the appropriation since HNEI says they do not need it. We'll have technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style, and the date is already defective. Any discussion? If not, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2483 SD2 with amendments. Seeing all members are present, are there any reservations or no's? Hearing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. All right, and then SB 2510, I'll summarize some of the changes. We are going to, let's see, I'll try to go through this quickly because we have another hearing to get to. So in objectives and policies for energy system planning, we are accepting a lot of what's already in here, but we're going to remove the part that relates to specific percentages and this additional process for amending those in the future, which really doesn't, as stated by the Energy Office, doesn't belong in the State Planning Act. And we're going to shift the focus from renewable to talking about the proper balance of grid resources to achieve a reliable, affordable, equitable, resilient, low greenhouse gas emission energy system that reduces reliance on imports and to achieve the 100% renewable energy standard and zero emission clean economy target. We are recognizing, keeping language in here, recognizing that firm renewable generation is a grid resource that can contribute to achieving these goals, including reliability, and also recognizing that the appropriate balance of resources will vary by county and should be considered by the appropriate state energy planning processes. We'll keep the part that allows in case of emergencies, fossil fuel generation to be prohibited after December 31st, 2045, except in case of emergencies. That kind of is a little bit redundant with what's already in the RPS, but we will keep that in, but we'll reduce this process laid out. Again, doesn't belong in the State Planning Act, but this process for extending these deadlines further. And then we will also take out the part, again, I said we'll take out the percentages and also the part that proposes to specifically limit the proportion of any one source of renewable energy to a maximum of 45% on each island. And again, shift that focus to balancing grid resources to achieve our goals. And then we are, again, amending that definition of firm renewable to match up with what we stated for the tax credit, which was energy that is available on the demand of the energy system operator, consistent with the terms of an approved PPA. And then we're adding a definition, we're keeping that definition of intermittent, which is everything that's not firm, and adding a definition of grid resources. That means all demand and supply side options to meet grid requirements, including but not limited to firm and intermittent energy generation, energy storage, demand response, efficiency, and customer sited resources. And then again, we're adding in some of the language that was in the prior bill to this. And then because we're removing that percentage that was in here, we'll also remove the further language at the end that we're deleting the language that asks Office of Planning and Sustainability to update the Energy State Functional Plan. They are not the appropriate entity for that. And then we're deleting the appropriation language for HNEI because we're not going to ask them to estimate what that percentage should be. We'll leave that up to already in place energy planning processes. So with that, I think the date is already defective. Members, any discussion?
Hi.
Rep. Todd.
I just want to thank you for keeping the conversation going. And I realize that it's an area where it's difficult to balance the various needs. And I think that came up through the testimony and the comments from the committee. About 40% of the petroleum-based generation on the Big Island is within a few miles of my house. And I think a lot of times when we're talking about new firm energy projects, something that gets lost in the shuffle about potential environmental impacts is that those impacts are already being felt in larger ways for existing plants that we've just kind of forgotten exist. So I know that this is part of a broader conversation, but I'm happy that we're having it. And then maybe we will apply more focus to these petroleum-based plants that are right in the middle of our towns as is, that we kind of forget are there. So thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Tokyo.
Real quick, Chair. I want to echo those comments as well, and also say to the energy companies, and I will use our example on Kauai. Thank you, Chair, for making those changes because it would tie their hands at KIUC, and as everybody knows at this table, KIUC is way ahead of the rest of the state in renewable energy, and I appreciate the opportunity to not tie their hands and move this bill along. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's interesting. KIUC makes a good example because if you calculate their current, what is from renewables, I think it's a pretty high percentage, but they had the autonomy to get to where they need to be on their own. And I think that's important.
Thank you.
Any further comments? All right, if not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 2510 SD2 with amendments. Seeing all members are present, are there any reservations or no's? Hearing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, we are adjourned. We have another bill to vote on.
We're gonna stay here? Oh,
So we are, I have a decision-making agenda, 10 a.m. We're running a little late on this. Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection on Senate Bill 3325 relating to carbon sequestration incentives. For this bill, we are going to put this program under DLNR as they have the on-the-ground expertise with land management and forestry, et cetera. We're going to make it a 3-year pilot program. We're going to rename it to be the Carbon Smart Land Management Assistance Program. And then in sections 3 and 4, we'll give one full-time position each to DLNR and one to DOA. So DLNR will be the lead. They can work with the person at DOA to implement this program, and we'll add funds for these positions and funds should they need outside technical assistance to implement. And I believe the data is already defective. If it's not, we'll defect it. And that is all. Any discussion, members? If not, Vice Chair, please take the vote.
Chair recommends passing SB 3325 SD2 with amendments. Seeing all members are present, are there any no's or reservations? Hearing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
All right, we are